Paltrocast.
Can I start this off with a compliment?
Yes, I love that start.
Big fan of what you both do.
Right.
Thank you.
Putting that out there because, you know, it started with watching The State and then watching every project that had a member of The State in that. But we're not here to talk about The State. We're here to talk about Outpost.
Yes.
But for the record, that's how it started with me too. When I met him, I was like, oh my God, it's the guy from The State. I was very excited about that. I was like, it's the dude from Wet Hot.
I tell you, it's got me a lot of mileage, Darren. So I'm appreciative.
But I'd have to imagine that the guy from The State ended with Superbad. Once people were like, yeah, you know, the guy from Superbad from that scene.
That's right.
Is that when it kind of ended?
It did. And it's always, you know, that guy, which is okay. Like, you're that guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy.
By the way, being that guy, it's pretty.
No
it's
complaints.
like it's a good career path.
Yeah.
I want to be that guy. That sounds good.
You are that guy.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, before I ask you a bunch of questions about yourself, Joe, there's one mystery I've never been able to figure out. And with your last name, is there a space after the LO or not? Because half the places get it one way, half the other.
There is. I complicated my life by spelling my last name correctly, which is the space. So that's often made many people call me Jolo, which is hard to swallow, and completely messed many things up. But you know, it's my own accord.
There you go. So
with our son, I put it together and I capitalized the T.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
But I didn't tell him I did that. But I do it because it
That's
makes it easier. Because sometimes when you check in for something, his name will be under T as opposed to L.
Anyway,
yeah, it's like when you see David Lee Roth in the record store. Do you look under the L or the R? I think the correct answer is the R, but he's confused the whole thing. So
Exactly.
this is not the David Lee Roth interview. However, this is the Beth and Joe interview. And Beth, Outpost. How much of the character that you play is there in Beth the human being?
Very little, in the sense that I don't have the PTSD element, but I do have that thing that a lot of women do, which is they keep a lot of things bottled inside, and they have like a nice sweet face on, and then sort of that anxiety can sort of erupt in different ways. So I can relate to that sort of a character in that way, and I think I do have access to my own darkness, so maybe there's a little bit of that, you know. But
you mean professional actress?
Being a professional actress is a dark place to be right now. It's very dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying right there, that you can channel things as needed, but also turn them off as needed and be a normal Beth.
That's correct.
You know, Beth also didn't know how to chop wood. So that she had very similar to the character of Kate in the movie.
Very cathartic experience chopping wood. I highly recommend it. It's really enjoyable. Like, I get it now.
Satisfying.
It's satisfying. Wielding an axe is satisfying.
Have you ever gone to one of those axe throwing courses or, you know, team building events?
Yeah, no, but they have bars now that are like, you can go drink and throw axes. I almost went one day and I didn't go, but I wanted to for this movie, but I wound up going to Griffith Park and getting some wood and creeping people out who were picnicking around me as I'm like trying to learn how to chop wood. Yeah. But it was worth it because it was helpful to learn from someone who knew how to do it. A friend of mine knew how to do it, so he came out with me.
You had someone with you.
Yes.
To be clear, she didn't go out by herself with an axe and wood and just hang out by people with picnic blankets.
Right. That's true. But I sort of did.
Right. We do find that about 15% of comedic actors and actresses actually come from carpenter backgrounds these days. That it's not just Harrison Ford, Adam Carolla, Nick Offerman.
Right.
You never know who before they made it was that. Are you allowed to say who trained you, that was a friend? Is it anyone we would know?
No, it's my friend Todd, but.
Oh. By the way, does anyone not like a person named Todd? Isn't Todd the most likable?
Well, here's what I'll say. Another thing about the name Todd, it is also my stepbrother's name, but is that everyone by the name of Todd is between the ages of 44 and 51.
Except Todd Rundgren.
Except for that, yes. But
he's an
generally-
outlier. He's an outlier.
He's an outlier.
Yeah.
But generally
Yeah.
speaking, that was when the name it sort of reached
It's
its
super popular.
peak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you don't meet a lot of Todds
It's true.
these days. You
Yeah.
don't meet a lot of children named Todd.
That's right. That's right. You're right.
No, well, Joe, Todd banter aside here, how long had you wanted to direct a film versus Outpost happening?
Probably since I was like, 11 or 12. I was a horror fan before I was a comedy fan. So although understandably this is quite a out of left field or like a surprise for most people, for me it's kind of a return to what got me interested in filmmaking and a true love of the genre that began with Fangoria magazine and Stephen King and all the movies that horror fans loved, playing on cable in the 70s and 80s. So this is quite a natural path, but I understand why people are like, what? Come on, Boyle, what's going on? Give us some laughs.
Hardly. I think that the comedy, did I just invent a new genre?
I love it. I love horrity.
Yeah.
Some horrity.
I think that horror.
You're onto something. This could be something.
Well, Beth was in the room, so she has a third of the trademark, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
In the room,
Some percentage of this.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, I think
what were you going to say?
I think it's a big overlap between horror and comedy because they're two timing-oriented genres. You see people genre hop between the two, obviously not just Jordan Peele, but these days it seems like you go from comedy to horror, horror to comedy, back and forth and all that.
Yeah, well, I think both genres require very heavy observation of human behavior and also warrant immediate reactions, whether to the moment or to the beat. So whether it's a laugh or a scream, I mean, they both kind of operate in the same space in that respect. And so I think those that are good at one, it makes sense that they're good at the other. Although I don't know how funny Carpenter is, John Carpenter or Cronenberg. Maybe they are very funny. I don't know.
Well, he put Rowdy Piper in a movie. So
fair enough. Yes.
sense of humor right there.
And that long fight scene was maybe one of the best of all time.
Holds up.
Keith David.
You guys, I don't know who is that.
Rowdy Piper was a very famous pro wrestler in the 80s who was in a movie called They Live by John Carpenter. And
supposedly the Beastie Boys, when they were allowed to be misogynistic and funny and all that, supposedly they were based on Roddy Piper because their producer Rick Rubin was a diehard wrestling fan, but at the time you couldn't admit you were a wrestling fan, maybe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Okay.
It's a good bit of trivia.
Fun fact. Well, Beth,
we're both learning today.
Comedy and all that. Beth, were you originally an East Coaster?
My stepdad was in the military, so I moved around all my life. I went to high school and college in Florida, and then moved to New York City for 4 years. But I've been out here longer than I've lived anywhere. I've lived in LA for 20 years, so I'm sort of from everywhere and nowhere. I lived in South Korea for a couple years, and yeah.
When did you start to find that all the New York people were moving to LA? I'm thinking it was like 2006.
Yeah,
that's when I moved here.
Oh, Joe, I did not read your Wikipedia. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I see that all the comedy and comedy adjacent people started in the mid 2000s, moved to LA, did the podcast things, launched a production company. So all the people that you were probably struggling alongside in 98, 99 are all the showrunners these days.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great comedic people from New York who are now out here in LA.
Well, I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, you brought up the States. So many of them had moved out here quite a bit before I did. And I think now we're pretty much split evenly on the coasts.
There you go. And one more state question before we take it back to Outpost. I interviewed Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head.
Oh, I love Sam. He's the best.
Okay. So is it true that the state started around the same time in the same apartment as Dogfish Head?
Kind of. Ken Marino of the State was Sam's roommate. And often some members of the State, Tom Lennon, myself, Ben Garant, would hang in that apartment as well. And I know that my big claim to fame with Sam is that I sampled his very first keg of beer that he ever made in his apartment. So one of the first Dogfish head batches. Very, very proud. It's a big boast for me.
History.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, hey, as promised, back to Outpost here.
Yeah.
How long has the film actually been done for?
So we shot it in summer of 21, and I think we had our final cut done at the last spring 2022. And so it took a while to get some distribution. And so, I mean, the whole process was about 5 years. I think I broke the first draft in the spring of 2018. So this was a long time coming. And certainly the biggest challenge was finding that location, because I knew that was going to be a big part of whether or not this movie worked.
There's a picture of the location right
here. We go. And of course, the lead actor needed to make that movie work, and Beth did a fantastic job. But as I'm sure independent filmmaking is just a slog, man. And we finally got there. We're excited that people could finally see this thing.
Yeah, it's very much a labor of love on both of our parts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beth, were you the last person on board or the first person on board?
First.
I think the first. Well, I think you had written a couple of scripts before. Right. Different scripts.
Yeah.
And I think, we both sort of came to that idea of like, well, let's make something with a much smaller cast, with less locations. I live here. I can, you could just be like, hey, are you around for, there's not gonna be like a bunch of scheduling conflicts. So it made sense to do that. And I'm so glad we did, because it was a project that we got to work on together. I mean, he did the lion's share of everything.
I reverse kind of engineered the story, because as Beth was saying, it began with like, all right, we know this is very low budget. We're going to be financing, and we're going to need to find a small cast. I'll use my friends who are actors, and we need some production value. So I'm like, well, what would look amazing for cheap? Well, the top of a mountain would. I didn't really think about the logistics of actually shooting a movie on the top of a mountain. Right. But once those kind of elements were in place, then I kind of reverse engineered the story and thought about the type of horror movies that I loved, which were descents into madness or isolation or paranoia or what's real, what's not, and started to just think about what kind of stories may come of a female protagonist in that environment,
And the follow-up question, which is potentially the last question I'd ask for you two, and we're going to wind around here. It's a lot of people, when they finish a book, they go, I'm not writing a book ever again. And then other people go, oh, I'm going to sell the next 3. Yeah. Now, when you finish a thing that you really helmed from start to finish, does that have you going, oh yeah, 3 more of these, or, oh boy, no thanks?
The short answer is 3 more of these. But there's certain roles that I took upon as producer and financier that I do not want to have anything to do with anymore.
The learning curve was very steep.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
There were some things I learned that you need to really be a bulldog and a pit bull to get done. And we got them done. But I'd rather kind of stay in the area of writer, director, and creative producer than one that's cracking the whip with other people aspects of the business.
Same deal for you, Beth. You didn't go, well, if you're not doing it, I'm doing that.
No, I mean, similar. I had a great experience because I didn't have to deal with all of the things that he was having to deal with. I would hear about it, but no, I mean, I think he has a lot of great ideas, especially with horror. And I think, I would love for us and What's That Noise to do more of these types of things. I don't know that we would want to finance it entirely, like, like we did, but absolutely. I mean, it was invigorating to be able to start and finish a project creatively, and just, it was awesome to be really very much a part of it. We were all in it together, a lot of the cast and crew, we all knew, a lot of us knew each other, He's a dear friend of Joe's from the 90s. He's been a friend of mine for years. So we were just all very aligned in terms of getting this project done. And shooting it was like, it's like summer camp. It was like we were all in this indie filmmaking thing together, so it was inspiring in that way, and just to have some control over the process.
Yeah, so much of it is just like, we did it. We've got a movie done. It's amazing to me that any movie gets done. Truly.
Yeah.
And to be able to kind of just have that as an achievement, let alone it being on a mountain at 6,300 feet up in the air, it's you walk away with like, all right, well, I know how to do this, and I'm excited to do more. Maybe not on a mountain, but more.
The best use of a mountain since Cliffhanger, Enter the Just Like Paradise video by David Lee Roth.
and Fitzcarraldo. Yes.
Paltrocast.